Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to my channel, I Hate Rock Music. And today I'm going to do a video about what's more or less a jazz band. And they're pretty quirky, and there's a lot of interesting elements in there. And so I decided, even though I've only done a handful of jazz bands on this channel, this would be a great one to add. And that's the group CONTRABAND. And they assembled in New York and Los Angeles in 1971. Released one album called Time and Space on Epic Records, and it's just a wonderful, excellent album, whether you're a jazz or a rock fan. And unfortunately, at this point, it still hasn't been released on CD. And for many years, it was really hard to find out much information about them. And even now, it's not that easy to find out that much information, although we do have the pedigrees of the different players. So I have Dave Pritchard on a guitar. He ended up playing with Gary Burton band as well, and he has quite a jazz pedigree. Charles Orania on sax and flute. Peter Robinson on piano, electric piano, organ, melodica, and ring modulator. And that's one of the things that makes this record particularly peculiar and wonderful, is ring modulator as part of the lineup of the sounds, and it's featured quite a bit on the record, so it really gives a lot of interesting textures for an electric jazz band. And then we have Bruce Cale on bass and violin, and Brian Moffett on drums, who of course is a stalwart in the jazz scene. So quite a luminary, quite a bunch of luminaries, and a lot of technical firepower. The rhythm section is absolutely killer, and they'd have to be to play this kind of free jazz, rock, and I guess what you'd call fusion. But that's one of the interesting things about CONTRABAND. Of course, after Miles Davis opened the door to electric jazz, we had an entire pantheon of bands like Tony Williams' Lifetime, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Return to Forever, Weather Report, 11th House. It didn't take long for Miles Davis' innovation of electric jazz to create a whole subgenre, and there's just an immense amount of bands out there that did electronic infused jazz. Another interesting band on Columbia Records around the same time was a group called Compost. Of course, most people don't remember them, but CONTRABAND is definitely one of the more obscure ones. But one of the things I like about them is they infuse jazz with electronics and electric instruments, but they're not really a fusion band. There's not a lot of high-powered jamming going on, like say somebody like Mahavishnu Orchestra, where the rhythm section really pounds out a straight rhythm for a long time, and everybody takes turns soloing. A lot more kinship to rock. CONTRABAND is definitely a jazz group, but one thing that makes them so interesting is there's a lot of Canterbury influence and a lot of kinship with Soft Machine, and I like the fact that they're doing jazz, but it's free jazz. I mean, it's definitely free form. There's definitely parts where it's more kinship to straight jazz or some fusion elements, but a lot of it is actual downright free jazz, and it really makes it wonderful to have a free jazz record that has electronic instruments. And then there's a lot of colors in the band as well. Dave Pritchard uses a talk box on parts and has a nice overdriven guitar tone. Obviously, a total pro as far as a jazz guitar player. He adds a lot of nice flourishes here and there. It certainly doesn't dominate the record. And then having Bruce Cale not only play bass, but upright bass and double bass, and then adds violin as well. So there's another color on the record that's really pretty unexpected. But the real star of the show is Pete Robinson. For a long time, there seemed to be some debate out there whether it was the same Pete Robinson that was in the dark prog band Quatermass out of the UK, and it indeed is the same Pete Robinson. So he went from dark, heavy prog rock with Quatermass, and then followed that with the group Suntreader, which was a drums, bass, piano group with a lot of great improvisation, hard to categorize. But then what a startling move to go to just straight jazz and he's got the chops for it. And all the colors added to the record with piano and electric piano and organ and melodica, and then the ring modulator. This is truly unlike any other jazz rock fusion album you've heard or any rock band you've ever heard. But like I say, I think the kinship to the UK Canterbury sound and groups like Soft Machine is another thing that just really sets this record apart. And so Pete Robinson was quite successful after that. He ended up playing with people like Carly Simon and Steeler's Wheel and doing a lot of film soundtracks and a lot of contributions to a whole wide range of certainly a lot more commercial artists. So hard to believe when you listen to the Quatermass record that guy ended up, although very talented, just interesting to see his trajectory. And it's good that he was incredibly successful. But this is one of those records he made that people aren't aware of, and I find it just absolutely fascinating that he went from Quatermass to Suntreader to Contraband, and then not only that, created one of the most unique electric jazz albums there ever has been. And I'm still kind of surprised it remains so obscure. It's under a lot of people's radar. It hasn't come out on CD, and it really is a singular group, unlike any other, and fits really well. So that whole pantheon of electric jazz bands that came after Miles Davis opened the door. Contraband is an absolutely stunning contribution to that arena of jazz rock. And in fact, I would almost go so far as to say that Contraband is more in the spirit of Electric Miles than a lot of fusion bands, because there's a lot of space, there's a lot of colors, and it's definitely free jazz. And Charles Orania is a smoking saxophone player, and so this record definitely fires on all pistons. I'll put a link below for you to check it out. But wow, what a stunner! And it's another one that I bought in cutouts. I think I bought it in 1973 for about $1.50. And I looked at the instrumentation and I knew it was going to be an interesting record. But it was hard to tell looking at the cover whether it was going to be jazz or rock. It has a really stunning and strange cover, which certainly drew me in. And at the tender age of 15 or 16, I got the record home, not knowing what it was going to be like, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm kind of surprised after getting the Contraband record that I didn't spend more time exploring jazz and free jazz right away. It took me probably another 4 or 5 years, but before I really got into jazz. And I'm a total free jazz fan as well as rock fan, and so I'm pretty well versed in the jazz arena now. And even with all my exposure to so much cool electric jazz and acoustic free jazz, the Contraband record still stands alone and is a wonderful addition to anyone's jazz or rock collection. So Contraband, I'm really looking forward to talking about this band because they're just so excellent and so unique, like so many of the bands I talk about on this channel. Pretty obscure, but as good as it gets, and as good as any of the big giants that everyone's well aware of. So hopefully someday this will come out on CD, and there'll be some more information about them, and maybe even some bonus tracks. And it's also, like I say with so many of these bands, it's really unfortunate that they only managed to put out one album, because having a lot more Contraband would be a blessing indeed. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.